It's summertime, so it is travel season, and today we're going to talk about traveling with your step family. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you a favor. If you enjoy the Stepmom Diaries podcast, would you do me a solid and go over to iTunes and leave me a nice review? I am here to serve stepmoms, and I want to reach as many stepmoms as possible. So I'm hoping that you and your review can help me do that. It's summertime, and people are starting to travel again. In fact, this summer, more than 80% of Americans say they're going to travel. Now, I know travel with kids can be challenging, but throw in step-family dynamics and it has the potential to be miserable. But it doesn't have to be. As I'm recording this, we are actually packing for our first international trip since COVID, since the pandemic started. We are getting ready for a trip that we are taking with my husband Craig's parents. His dad turned 80 during the pandemic, so it's a trip that he had planned for all of us a couple of years ago, but couldn't take because of the pandemic. And we are so excited about it. We are going to France. Craig is fluent in French, and we've both lived in Paris at various points. And to be honest, we're both total Francophiles, so we love going there. We both really just love to travel, right? I have been traveling for most of my adult life, as has Craig. I have visited 6 continents, dozens of countries, and probably about 3/4 of the states in the U.S. Craig has been to a couple fewer continents, but he has 49 states and no small number of conflict zones under his belt. Now, it's not a new lesson for Craig, but since I have been a stepmom, I have learned in these last few years that trips with children, especially stepchildren, can be tricky. Children travel differently than adults, and then you have to throw in step-family dynamics. In general, kids don't have the same attention span. They need more guidance navigating new places, and they need to know that you've got them covered and that you're handling everything. Since I've been a stepmom, we have done a number of very long car and train trips and lots of flights with our kids. Suffice to say, I had to learn a lot and quick about how to tee up a great trip and keep kids engaged throughout. So I thought I would share what I have learned with you today. Okay. The first piece of advice that I'm going to share with you is maybe the most important, which is communicating before the trip. Making sure that you've had conversations with your partner and with the kids so that everybody understands expectations before you start the trip. You want to understand what your spouse expects and how they think things are going to go and what they think that, your role on the trip is going to be. And, you want to talk to them about your expectations. The two of you really want to talk about how you're going to handle things if they go sideways, because let's face it, travel with kids, things can go sideways pretty quickly. If the kids are disrespectful to you or your partner, or if they need disciplining. If you've listened to me for a while, you know that I advise strongly against you, the stepmom, being the primary disciplinarian. That role really needs to be with your partner. And that doesn't change just because you're on vacation. But it can be more challenging when you're on vacation because, frankly, sometimes it's got to be all hands on deck, right? Stuff goes sideways and you've got to handle it. So you might have your partner have a conversation with the kids before you go, really to remind them that you have the authority for decisions, that, when you're all in a new place, they need to listen to you just as they would their parent, just as they would when they're at home. And I know that can be a challenge, especially depending on age. And let's face it, if you have problems with the kids at home, you're probably going to have problems with them on a trip. And even if you don't have problems with them at home, you may have problems on the trip, right? But even the most surly teen or tween is probably going to put a smile on their face if you're doing something really neat, especially if you have kind of teed things up properly. So let's talk a little bit about that. Planning is a really important component of a trip, right? Anytime you take a trip, whether it's just you and your spouse, or your whole family, you do a lot of planning. You're talking about flights and hotels and all the things. Engage the kids in that planning. I'll tell you, almost from the minute that we decide we're going to take a trip, we start talking about it with the kids. What kind of flights are we going to be taking? What is there going to be to do on the ground? What are we going to eat there? What kinds of things do we want to see? We also ask each child what they want to do the most, and we try to work that in. We talk about all the logistics. How long are the flights? What's going to happen on a layover? How are we going to get from the airport to the hotel? How are we going to get around once we're there? I'll tell you, every single trip we've taken, the kids always ask, if we're renting a car, what kind of car we're renting. Sometimes you just don't know that, right? But they always want to know. I don't know why it is. If there's a time difference, how that's going to work, what kinds of people you might come across. Really, we kind of talk about anything and everything about the trip that we can think of. And really, this isn't just so that the kids know what to expect. Anticipation is really fun. And especially, depending on the age of the kids, when you start to travel or plan travel, a few weeks or a few months out, building that anticipation can be almost as fun as the trip, right? Chances are they're going to be excited about travel, especially if it's a big trip. They may also be a little anxious about it. So that's where, talking about it beforehand can help. Including them in the planning, helping them understand what to expect can also allay any kind of anxiety that they may have about being in a new place or doing new things. But when you're talking about it before you go, you can kind of frame it in a way that's exciting and get them really amped up for the trip. So let's talk a little bit about sightseeing decisions and things that happen, once you're actually en route and on the ground at your destination. And these things apply really whether or not, you're in a step family, but giving kids some ownership in the planning process, really makes a difference in terms of getting them excited for the trip. If you let them pick some sightseeing stops that are on the trip or pick some things that they really want to do, they're going to get excited because they're going to feel like they've got ownership. And, with teens and tweens, that may even help offset some of the eye rolls you're going to get. I don't know. I remember a few years ago, we took my stepson and stepdaughter to Florida to visit family and friends. My, at the time, 12-year-old stepson, the one thing he wanted to do was go to the alligator farm in St. Augustine. The one thing that my, at the time, 13-year-old stepdaughter wanted to do was hit the beach. So we did both. When the weather did not cooperate for quite as much beach time as we had hoped, but we did get on the beach a little bit, and we went to the alligator farm, and it was a ton of fun, and both kids felt like they had had a say in what we did. When we took the kids to Paris, a couple of years later, our 12-year-old had immediately decided when we started planning that he wanted to visit the Paris catacombs. Both of the kids wanted to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and of course, our, at the time, 13-year-old could not wait to shop. So we arranged to visit the Eiffel Tower and the catacombs on our second day of the trip, and then I took my stepdaughter for some one-on-one shopping time on the fourth day. Now, depending on your stepkid's age, this planning in advance of the trip also extends to the packing process, and packing for a trip can be truly excruciating, whether or not you're in a step family and whether or not you have kids, frankly, right? It can be hard to plan what you need, what you think you might need, whether you're going to overpack, what kind of size bag you're going to take. So depending on how old the kids are, they may or may not need your help packing. They may or may not want your help packing. I will tell you that when our kids reach the sort of tween teen stage of things, we do let them pack their own bags. And it depends on their level of independence, whether or not you want to sort of double check what they're packing. I know when we took the kids to Paris, the at the time 13-year-old packed her own bag, and she brought exactly what she needed. I will tell you, her packing lists are almost professional level. Except when we went to Paris, she only packed one pair of socks for an entire week. So luckily we wear the same size shoe, and I had packed a couple of extra pairs that she was able to use. Our, at the time, 12-year-old, on the other hand, only a year's difference in age, he would pack his suitcase and then bring it to us when he was finished packing so that we could kind of go through and make sure that he had packed some of the right things. For that Paris trip, we did swap out some of his clothing choices. We also had to fold his clothes, which he had just shoved into the suitcase, and that's a whole different conversation. I don't know if that's a gender thing or what, but yeah, I would say start the packing process, or at least the packing discussion about what they'll need to bring, with plenty of time to let you buy any items that you need so that you're not panicking at the last minute. I'll tell you, as we were preparing for that particular Paris trip with the kids, we were going over New Year's, and we realized that my stepdaughter did not have gloves or a winter hat. So Amazon Prime got a few last minute orders that time. And I just, in general, can't count the times that Prime has saved my butt on something travel related. All right, so the other thing to talk about is snacks. And I don't know if this is just me, I don't know about you, but whether it's for a long flight or a road trip, whether I'm traveling alone or with my husband or with my kids, I always bring snacks. There's some sort of fear that I have about getting stuck someplace and not having access to food. I don't know, maybe I need to analyze whether something happened in my childhood to make me so worried about whether I'd get stuck without food. But I always bring snacks. And when I started traveling with the kids, that took the form of what I called snack packs. I did this on the very first plane trip I took with them, and it then became a little bit of a tradition that the kids look forward to. And in fact, for that Paris trip I was just telling you about, we got the kids back from their mom the day we left for the trip, and literally the first thing they asked when they walked in the door was, where were their snack packs? Had I already made them for the flight? So on our last few trips, I've also packed them for my husband and for me, and we just always enjoy having treats on the plane. The process is really simple. I load up a gallon-sized Ziploc bag with sample-sized treats. Super easy. I pretty much do the same thing for every member of the family, and, with some minor differences to account for the kids' tastes. You don't have to spend a ton of money on this. I did things like, instead of buying the individual bags of Goldfish crackers, I just bought a big carton of it and divided them into little Ziploc snack bags. I'll try to find some sort of halfway nutritious item like trail mix, but okay, who are we kidding? I like the trail mix that has M&Ms and all the good stuff. But then I also throw in some of the things the kids really like Sour Patch Kids and M&Ms and stuff like that. If you are visiting a foreign country with kids, you might also consider bringing along some protein bars. If the kids are picky eaters, a lot of times you'll be able to find restaurants that have kid-friendly options, but, picky eaters may not be as readily available as the food is here. I'll also say one of the things that I have found, at least in recent years, and I don't think this used to be the case, there are 1,000,001 guidebooks for kids. To help get your kids excited for the trip, which we just talked about a few minutes ago, see if there's a guidebook for where you're visiting that's aimed more at kids than adults. And a lot of times they'll find that, there are fun facts and, really neat kid-friendly stories about the city and travel journals and stuff like that. And this will help them get really excited for the trip. And, maybe everybody will learn some stuff. Rick Steves, I know, has got some. Lonely Planet has got some for kids. Look on Amazon. There are a ton of interesting options. All right, so you've done all your advanced planning. You've sat down with your spouse. You've talked about, what your roles are going to be on the trip. You've talked about expectations and, you've gotten the kids amped up and excited for the trip. What happens once you're there? Well, I think, a lot of it is really continuing to control expectations, continuing to kind of follow the plans that you've laid out before you have gone on the trip, but, allowing for some spontaneity, allowing for some last minute, fun and ideas. I'll tell you, every night when we're traveling with the kids, we will spend just a few minutes at night talking about the next day's activities and what we're doing so there aren't any surprises. And we do try to stick to the plan as much as we can, but, we also allow for some wiggle room because there are times when one of the kids or one of us sees something along the way that they think might be fun to do. The other thing I'll say is be ready to completely throw out your idea of the perfect vacation or the perfect experience while you're on vacation. Stuff is going to come up that you didn't plan for. It's going to be unexpected. It could be, crazy, and just know that you have lined as much of it as you can up before you go. Know that the expectations and all of that stuff that you have discussed, in advance, but be prepared that no vacation with kids is totally perfect, much less throwing in the step family dynamic or any stuff that you've got going on there. And just be prepared that no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you do, it's not going to be perfect, but it is going to be memorable, right? And that's the goal, is a memorable vacation that everyone remembers positively. We know that step kids and step family dynamics can be really stressful. Traveling with your step family can be even more stressful. It can be tiring, it can be frustrating, and when you have a bad day of travel, you may want to pull your hair out, Kids can take it out on each other. They can take it out on you if they're tired or hungry or just out of sorts from travel. But showing them the world, seeing it through their eyes, and taking that travel time and using it as an opportunity to really build memories together and to bond together without distraction, that's priceless. That helps turn any rough moments from the trip into distant memories and really will help you preserve the recollections of what is hopefully a fantastic trip. As with almost every other kind of family dynamic, things can be a lot more complicated when you're a step family. But whether you're planning a weekend getaway or some kind of fabulous international vacation, with some thought, with some advanced preparation, and with some effort to really set expectations and have a lot of conversations with the kids before you go, it can be a truly wonderful time for you to bond with your family, individually with your stepkids. And so I hope some of these tips and tricks have helped you. I hope that as you're planning your summer travel, that you'll take them into consideration and, really do everything you can in advance to prepare. And I hope that you make some great memories this summer. That's all for this week. See you next time. Bye for now. That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.